Hold on a minute. Don't you think we ought to talk?
What, about how I'm gonna run? Sure.
About how you've managed to live as long as you have.
Think he can drive?
Oh, he can drive. He can drive beyond the limits of the tires, the engine, the car, anything else.
There's nothing I can't do with the race car.
Well, that's the difference between you and me. There's only so much I can do.
You want me to work the pit and you drive?
You run good?
Thank you.
We'll see how you do in a crowd.
I was desperate to get your attention.
Hey everybody, it's the Cannon Cruisers. I'm JD.
And I'm Randy, and we're continuing our cruise through this summer special that we've been doing with the Tony Scott film from 1990, Days of Thunder.
It's only his third movie.
Yes, and it features little unknown actors Tom Cruise, Nicole Kidman, Robert Duvall, Randy Quaid, and Cary Elwes.
Never heard of any one of them before.
Oh, and Michael Rooker.
Oh, okay.
And Fred Thompson. And John C. Reilly. I really don't know any of these actors.
There's a lot of people in this movie for some reason. I don't really know why. It's not a very well-known movie. This is probably the least known of the sports movies.
It was a failure. It's like, I don't know why anybody would ever watch this movie with how big of a failure it is.
I mean, a disappointment. Let's put it this way. It's a $60 million budget, and it made almost $160 million at the box office. That's a huge flop by any metric. I don't know who you are.
Hollywood accounting. Hollywood accounting.
Anyway, I'm sure you've heard of this movie. This is Days of Thunder starring Tom Cruise.
This is Top Gun on a racetrack.
Yes, and it was about as big as Top Gun because this movie was very popular when it came out. It was very popular for a very long time. Even though critics apparently didn't like it very much at first, it was popular with everybody else. This is one of the most referenced movies of its time period for sure.
Especially when it comes to things about NASCAR, this movie will get a reference.
Yeah, it's not as talked about today, which is one of the reasons we're watching it, but I don't even think we've seen it in about as long.
Oh, I haven't seen it since VHS days. I don't think I even owned it on DVD.
Mm-hmm.
I may have, but I don't remember if I did.
So it's probably the first time you've seen it on widescreen then, because...
Probably.
It probably benefits from having widescreen considering the nature of this, because this is a movie about racing. And not just any racing, NASCAR racing. Which means it needs a lot of horizontal movement. Otherwise, you're going to miss half the picture. And thankfully, that's what we saw now.
So, JD, what is the plot of Days of Thunder?
Oh, this is a complicated one. Let's see. Tom Cruise, his name is Cole
Trickle.
Now, here's his big dilemma. He's a race car driver, and he wants to win. That's pretty much the plot of the movie. There's nothing else to talk about in regards to the plots.
This is usually where I jump in and I give the actual plot of the movie, but no, that's literally the plot of the movie. He's a race car driver who wants to win, and there's a setback that he comes back from, and that's the movie.
Yeah, that's the most...
And there's love and laughter and freedom.
That's the most cliched aspect of the movie. It's a sports movie, which means guy wants to be the best, stumbles on the way to being the best, then becomes the best by the end. That's pretty much the broad strokes of the movie.
And is made better by the love of a good woman.
And friends, apparently.
And friends.
And rivalry.
And rivalry.
And Mellow Yellow.
Yes, because Mellow Yellow was like, we paid enough to put our name on the car.
Yes, Mellow Yellow. If anybody remembers Mellow Yellow, because I don't even remember the last time I even thought of Mellow Yellow. It's been a very long time.
Oddly enough, I have recently, just out of nowhere, apropos of nothing, sat there and went, they call me Mellow Yellow, because of the commercial from way back when.
So, Randy, you're the big Tony Scott guy around here.
Not really. But I do know a lot of his movies.
Apparently you do.
So yes, Tony Scott did a lot of great movies.
And this is only his third one. For those keeping track, Top Gun, which is one of his most popular movies, was only his second film. So yeah, you're looking at a pretty big streak here.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure he was at his top of his game while his brother, who is Ridley Scott, was struggling a bit.
It's if you look at it closely, you realize that Tony Scott has more bangers than his brother does.
Yeah, Ridley Scott. He's more consistent than Ridley Scott as well. That's why I wasn't going to turn down watching a movie. No, it's a Ridley Scott, or it's a Tony Scott movie, so it's probably going to be at least worth watching. And it turns out it was, because there was quite a lot in the movie, despite the fact that the plot is pretty straightforward. There's a lot going on in this film.
Yeah, this is a man that went from doing an erotic British thriller to
Top Gun
to Beverly Hills Cop to a Kevin Costner movie, Revenge, and then did Days of Thunder.
Yeah.
Which gave us a decade of Cruise and Kidman.
Yeah, because they got together in 1990 and broke up about 2001, 2002, which is just after the other film they started, which was Eyes Wide Shut.
Yeah.
Kind of weird to think about.
But nobody remembers Far and Away. Nobody remembers Far and Away.
I didn't remember till you mentioned it.
I don't even remember what that movie is about. All I know is it stars the cruise missile and the Kid Man.
Well, that's because everybody had this idea that Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman were everywhere in the 90s, and they were talked about all the time.
They were talked about all the time.
But they were not actually in that many things together. You figure with that amount of focus, well, maybe it was a Ben Affleck, Jennifer Lopez situation. Everybody got sick of them. Apparently not really.
Yeah, whereas J-Lo was shoved down our throat, and it was a marketing gimmick.
Yeah, it was.
They were a marketing gimmick as well in a way, but they did not abuse it as much by appearing in multiple movies.
That was mostly the entertainment press going on and on about them. Otherwise, they were in Days of Thunder, then they had their entire relationship, then they had
Far and
Eyes
Away,
Wide Shut.
and then Eyes Wide Shut.
And then that was it. And there's like a giant decade in between.
And then since then, they can't stand to be in the same room as each other.
But that's for another discussion altogether. In this one, we'll just talk about how...
One magic word to explain it all, Scientology.
Well, we'll just talk about in this one. This is Days of Thunder. What does everybody know about Days of Thunder other than it's a racing movie? Did you know it's basically Top Gun with cars? Because that's pretty much...
That was the complaint. Actually, that was one of the biggest complaints from the reviewers at the time, was that it's basically just Top Gun with cars.
And here's the rebuttal to that. It doesn't matter.
It was still fun to watch.
It's still really enjoyable to watch. It's very engaging.
Yes, it's very by the numbers in its plotting, but...
The characters are fun, the jokes are fun, the action's fun, the acting's fun, the set pieces are fun.
Do I need to tell you the cast
racing's
again?
fun.
Tom Cruise, Nicole Kidman, Robert Duvall, Randy
is really
Quaid,
good.
Carrie Ellis, and Michael Rooker.
Like, this is the prime example of, it doesn't matter how cliched or obvious your base premise might be. If you put all into executing it, it doesn't matter at all. You literally subvert any expectations of, oh, well, I guess it's okay. No, it goes right away to, okay, this is great. I agree.
I mean, not everything can be a delightful Christmas fantasy, fun for everyone from outer space.
Why are you reading the Christmas Martians box? That has nothing to do with this in any capacity. So, Randy, since you haven't seen this one since VHS, what were your impressions watching it again?
It stood the test of time. It actually stood up. And I'm surprised by how much of the movie that I remember.
Yeah.
Vividly remember.
I will say one strange part about this movie, because I remember this complaint in the back of my head for years, and I don't remember why. And I don't remember who said it, but I have this lingering thing in the back of my head saying, this movie is supposedly boring. And I don't know why, because I watched it and I wasn't bored at all at any point. I don't know where that would have come from or who would have said it, but I think whoever did it must be brain damaged, because this movie never stops. It's always going.
It's high octane, not just like the gas that's used to power the cars.
No, it definitely works with the fact that it's racing, because it's always moving. There's always something happening.
And this movie does for NASCAR what NASCAR can't do for NASCAR, make the races exciting.
Yeah, it's one of those movies where they make the actual sport look a lot cooler than it is. Like, we've had that a few times on here with the sports movies, but in this case, Tony Scott's directing in this movie, wow.
Yeah, he was one of the great directors.
He knew how to shoot something and make it look great. because not just the racing, but everything surrounding the racing, from how he shot the people to the scenery to the cinematography to just like locations and angles, like with the sun coming in and casting rays over everything. He knew how to do everything. And again, it's like his second big Hollywood movie. So that's crazy to think about. And even at this stage, he knew what he was doing. So that's the general gist of it. So let's go right into it, Randy. Do you want to talk about your lowlights or your highlights for Days of Thunder 1990?
Let's be lazy, go with the lowlights, and just say that, man, it predictable from beginning to end.
That's the problem, though, is that's like the only negative I can think of. Is that it's pretty predictable. Like, you know what's going to happen when it starts. It's going to be, okay, he's Tom Cruise's character. He's going to be a racer. He's going to do well. He's going to have problems. And then at the end, he's going to pull it out at the end. Which, of course, that's what happens. That's this type of movie.
Other low light is Nicole Kidman is too attractive that it's distracting.
I thought it was too distracted by her accent, because I was thinking, this is definitely one of his earlier movies, because she's still speaking Australian. Not an Australian accent, she's speaking Australian.
Yeah.
Because the last time we watched her was not that long ago. In fact, it was in this very series with BMX Bandits. And that, in this span here, is only about 7 years ago. And in that time, she was only in a handful of other movies, and most of them were still Australian. And this might have actually been her first American movie. I don't actually know, but it might have been. Because she still had her accent. It was so noticeable.
Originally, for her role, they wanted Robin Wright.
I could see it, but
But she was unavailable, so they went on this recommendation that they had from this movie called Dead Calm, and brought in Nicole Kidman, which ended the Tom Cruise Mimi Rogers marriage.
which is not the first time that's happened in regards to one of his marriages, but that's beside the point. So, just putting aside the negatives, because again, that's the most obvious thing you're going to get.
One of them is me joking about it.
It's pretty obvious. That aside, the highlight of the movie would be...
The directing.
Yeah. I think the directing is what really makes this movie and takes it from, like I said, it would otherwise just be a predictable movie. And
we had this discussion. You brought up that you could take any director. Ridley Scott directed this movie; it would not look as good.
Yeah.
If you went for more modern ones, you had a Christopher Nolan doing this, it wouldn't be as good. It'd just be overly loud. If you had a Tarantino who really did like this movie do this movie, it would be something completely different.
Yeah, it would not be like this. Tony Scott had this way, and I don't know how it was, to make the cinematography, the action, feel like a character in the movie, to the point that it blends in so seamlessly with everything else going on that every part of it is just engaging from beginning to end. Like I said, it's not a boring movie, and the story is always moving, but even when it's not really doing a whole lot, you're still engaged because of everything going on the screen. It's always
to
pulling
give you an
in.
example of like a really good shot, the final race, it's doing a callback to the race where Cole Trickle gets hurt, as well as his rival / friend gets hurt in the cloud of that's come up from a humongous crash, and they just go through it. So he goes through it, and it just follows him all the way as you see the car slowly pulling away on fire, and he makes it through that smoke.
And at the same time, I'm pretty sure he superimposes footage from the crash from the same angle.
Exactly. So he superimposes it on, so you're seeing a double vision of it.
So it's kind of like you're going through his fears at the same time as he's surpassing them, which is a really cool shot, especially when it comes out and the smoke parts, and then that rock music comes in, and it's like, wow, that's really exciting.
I did it, Harry!
Yeah, so that's pretty much the movie. Every time something like that happens, you're just like, wow, that was exciting. I can't wait to see what happens next. And then something even more exciting happens. That's pretty much the entire film. Like, I'm trying to think about it. How
about that shot of him crossing the finish line? Oh, wait, they forgot to film that shot.
One of the ones I like was the earlier scene where they were waiting at the dinner, and you're cutting away to him and his rival, and they're racing on the beach, crashing into each other's cars, and it's cutting back and forth. And the whole time they're doing that, like this feels like such a modern shot that it almost doesn't. It's hard to believe this was made in 1990.
Would you believe that whole thing is based on a true story?
Yeah, I would actually, because there's a lot of the movie is, like I said, even though it is predictable, every aspect of it is so well done and breathes believability that it doesn't matter in the end. It just doesn't.
It's the movie itself is not based on a true story. It's not a biography, not an autobiography, not a whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But there are stories within the story that are based on anecdotes from NASCAR, the things that happened, like the whole thing with oh yeah, no, you can't come pull in right now because we're all having ice cream. That apparently something that happened in the 70s. The whole thing where he takes at Carrie Elvis's car after he completely blows both of his tires.
Yeah.
After he wins, so it's like, okay, and he crashes his car. That's from a real life an event that happened.
Now that you mention that, it makes me think of when we were talking about The Natural and saying one of the things that made The Natural so good is how they mythologized the sport in a way where it made it seem like almost epic in scope. That's like this movie. It does that with racing. It does the same sort of thing where it takes different aspects of the sport and manages to balloon it and build it up to the fact that it makes it seem even bigger than it is in real life. And Tony Scott, again, managed to do that at the same time by focusing on the fact that it's racing, so everything has to move fast.
He focused on the speed.
And it was a very fast movie with a lot of speed.
He approached it with the same idea as he did with Top Gun. It's the speed.
Yeah, in this case, it probably made more sense than even Top Gun because racing is about going fast. That's just what it is. And the entire movie, the entire time I was watching, it's like, this really does make racing seem a lot cooler than it is in real life, which is the best compliment you can give to a movie like that. Because that's what it's trying to do. The worst kind of movie like that is where it does the opposite and makes the sport seem worse than it actually is.
It's like, yeah, we're kind of backhanding commenting on NASCAR just because that... It really is just a bunch of cars driving around in a circle for several hours.
You could easily make it look a lot worse than this.
Yeah.
Even worse than it is in real life. So, like, even worse is what I mean. I don't mean to insult
Though kind of like baseball, which at its core can be a boring sport to watch. They are fun to watch from experience. Baseball and watching car racing is actually, not on television, in real life, is fun.
Well, like when we did Dead Solid Perfect, they couldn't really make golf exciting, but for a counterexample, that one, Happy Gilmore's a really well-loved movie, and they managed to make golf in that movie exciting, and that's a comedy, but they managed to make the sport look exciting. So it can be done. It doesn't really, I don't think it really matters what the sport in question is. It's more like what the director can do with what they have. Like,
and this is probably
makes the sport tick.
One of the movies where it actually focused on the sport as opposed to the sport being part of a greater story that was going on in it.
Yeah, it is pretty much a sports movie. Like we talked about a bunch of them so far, and all of them have the sport as a very important bearing in the gears, I guess, of the
they're
story.
A touchstone.
In this movie, it's kind of like racing is the lifeblood of the movie in every
and of the characters and everything. Yes,
and even the way he directs the movie. So it all comes together in a way that this doesn't work unless it's a racing movie, written by the writer, directed by the director, acted by these people. So in the end, even though, like I said, story is pretty straightforward, it still ends up being its own unique thing in the end that you can't really replicate, I don't think.
And I'm really surprised that there was not sequels, that there were not rebootquels. Like you would have seen at some point, if this movie hadn't been such a box office failure, a straight-to-video release of Days of Thunder 2: Race to the Finish.
That's kind of surprising you never did, because like this movie...
I just came up with that title on the spot, and that's perfect for a straight-to-video adaptation of Days of Thunder.
Despite all the stuff we were talking about, though, Days of Thunder was very popular back in the day. Like, there was a ride, you even mentioned it.
Yeah, there was a ride at Canada's Wonderland, which was one of those 4DX experiences that that are starting to get big now in movie theaters.
Yeah, it was a popular movie that did very well, so it's kind of surprising. But then again, it might have something to do with Tom Cruise, because as I said, I don't think any of his movies have ever had sequels without his involvement in some capacity. Because I can't think of any of them. Even, like you said, Top Gun Maverick, Tom Cruise. There was no reboot. There was a sequel. So, like, it might be the same sort of thing here. Who knows? But to avoid getting too far off topic in regards to Days of Thunder, I can definitely see why it was as popular as it was, because I barely remembered the movie, other than pretty sure we rented it back in the day like we usually did with a lot of stuff, but I don't really remember it until I watched it.
And honestly, I think that the title of this movie is the most evocative of the sport out of any of the other movies that we've watched.
I've always liked the title of this movie because it's always stuck in my head. It's very unique, and it's very particular to this movie, to the fact that you can't really separate the two.
Because, yeah, it is a very poetic way of describing a car race. It is a Day of Thunder.
It's a very beautiful movie in a lot of ways. Like I said, the shot composition, the cinematography, everything about it just looks really good. So a title like that suits it very well.
Though a terrible, terrible tagline, "You can't stop the thunder."
That's kind of a weird tagline for this movie, because that's not really uttered anywhere in this film in any way. But yeah, let's just get into it, Randy. What are you going to give Days of Thunder? Can I guess what you're going to give this movie?
I'll let you do the thing that I usually do. So, yes, you may guess what I'm giving this movie.
Are you going to give it a 1 out of 5, Randy? Because I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5.
Wow, you like the movie a lot more than I do. I was going to give it a 4.
I'm giving it a 5. I don't have any complaints about this movie. I don't think there's anything you can do better.
Oh no, I was legitimate when I said that the biggest issue with the movie is that it's too damn predictable.
But the problem with that is it doesn't end up mattering in the end. So
No, but that is the knock against it. So it's a 4. It's perfectly fine, perfectly 4 out of 5 movie for me.
I'll give it a 5. I think it's pretty much perfect as a racing movie, and I don't think you could really do better than this. And I don't think anybody is going to do better than this, because they still haven't.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen another... Well, no, there have been other racing movies, but they're usually biographical in nature, and it's less about the sport and more about the story.
And not filmed in a way where it basically matches a race, because that's what this does.
Though I did keep chuckling to myself. It's like, how many laps do I have left? Well, you're only at lap 50. Like 2 minutes later, how many laps do I have left? Oh, you have 50 laps left. Okay, 2 minutes later, how many laps do I have left? There's only 3 laps left. And this all happens over the course of 5 minutes.
It's a very fast-moving movie, which is suiting to what it is. So I will say in the end, it's definitely held up very well, and it's definitely worth a recommendation even today.
And just what we had watched, it was on a streaming service. It's actually available on something. It's like Paramount, obviously.
Yeah.
But this must have been a remastered, or it must have been up-resed, or it just came from a very good master, because it looks beautiful, even in streaming.
Surprisingly good.
And admittedly, I don't have a 4K TV. Okay, I only have 1080p. I've never gone higher.
You don't really need it because it still looks great, regardless.
I still want to get a 65-inch TV with the amount of movies we watch.
We watch a lot of them, but this one was surprisingly good, and I'm glad you suggested this one, because 1990 is supposedly the last year we're covering in this thing we're doing.
Oh, we're doing one more movie after this, just because it has to even out to a thing. There's no surprise there. You're not getting a bonus.
It's just the way it is.
This was supposed to be the final movie, but we did the math and went, oh crap, we have one more week.
We have one more week to fill, so we're gonna watch another one. Yeah, whatever it is, you'll have to wait and see for next week.
And it may just be tonal whiplash. For all you know, we might be doing basketball next, and we're not doing basketball next.
No, we're gonna do Gone in 60 Seconds for some reason.
Hey, I'm not the one that thought it was a Tony Scott movie.
I don't even know why I did, but I did. All right, everybody. That's all we've got for this one, and we'll see you next time. We continue our cruise through our sports movie catalog. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
I've walked into a jungle.
Come up here and do it. I'll take you to a race.
Really, I can't. I'm a doctor. I'm a call.
Think your driving can improve?
I'll take your word for what a car can do, but I'm not taking anybody's word for what I can do.
I don't want you to hold a bad opinion of Cole. I believe it scares him. He needs reassurance from you that he's okay. After all,
How could you ignore me like that? I wasn't ignoring you.
you're his doctor.
The driver gets his bell rung and a couple of lights flicker. And loses what he needs more than his eyesight, more than his reflexes, more than anything in the world.
I've raced with my legs broke, heart bruised, eyes popping out of my head like they're on springs.
He loses his need. The need to drive right out there on the ragged edge.
He doesn't believe you can drive anymore.
How long before you find out if you're really good?
You just want to race again.
Are you really lucky?
You get back in that car, you'll die.